What are you doing? What are you doing with your life? What's the point? And when you're done, what do you do after you're finished doing what you're trying to do? For as long as I can remember, I've found myself asking, what's the point? In almost every context. Why are we doing this? I think. Is it really necessary? Okay, well, what do we do after we're done? Then what? I'd like to read for you a parable that pretty much sums up the mindset that I've developed, a mindset that I can't seem to get away from no matter how hard I try as I navigate nearly every aspect of life. And that is the parable of the Mexican fisherman. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked why he didn't stay out a little longer and catch more fish. The Mexican said it was because he had enough fish. The American, like so many Americans who think the meaning of life is to go to work, was confused by this and asked the Mexican fisherman, "So, what do you do with the rest of your time?" The Mexican fisherman said, "I like to play with my children and teach them. I like to fish during the day. I like to sleep at night. I like to take siestas with my wife Maria. In the evenings, we sit together and my amigos come over. We play the mariachi. We sing songs and talk. I live a full and busy life." The American scoffed, "I have an MBA from Harvard. I can help you. You should spend more time fishing, and with the proceeds, buy a bigger boat. And with the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you'd have a fleet of boats. And instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you would sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. So you would control the product, the processing, and the distribution. Of course, you'd need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, then LA, then eventually New York City, where you'll run your expanding enterprise." The Mexican fisherman asked, "How long will all this take?" To which the American replied, "Oh, roughly 15 to 20 years, maybe." So the Mexican fisherman said, "Okay, and then what?" The American laughed and said, "Oh, that's the best part. When the time's right, you'd announce an IPO and sell your company's stock to the public and become very rich. You'd make millions." The Mexican fisherman said, "Then what?" The American said, "Then you would retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep, fish, and play with your kids, and take siestas with your wife, and go for strolls, and in the evenings you could play the mariachi and sing songs with your amigos." I assume you get the point. Where are you going in life? What's the goal? What's next? What are you really trying to achieve? It's useless to separate your goals from relationships. There was a book that someone gifted to me sometime. I think it was called Into the Wild or something like that. It was a story about Emil Hirsch, son of wealthy parents who graduates, always dreamed about going off into the wilderness and surviving. He was something of an introvert. Eventually, he gives away everything he has and sets off on his goal. After years, he finally goes off into the wilderness. It was said that he spent something like 6 months in the Alaskan wild. Spoiler alert, he eventually died, as one might expect. Nonetheless, the whole time on his journeys, he had, over the years, he had been journaling. When they found his body, they found also his journal. And a lot of the material in that journal is what allowed them to make a book and a movie out of the story of his life. Anyway, it's said that the last thing Mr. Hirsch wrote in his journal was this: "Happiness is only real when it's shared." I've traveled quite a bit myself and had quite a good number of experiences, sorts of things that people can only dream of. Whenever I see something really cool, I find myself looking to the left and right of me and just to see, did anyone else see that? No matter what your endeavor is in life, at some point it comes back to people. At least it should. And I know some very rich people who still aren't content, right? So $100 million isn't enough. And it's got to be $1 billion. It's got to be $10 billion. It's got to be $100 billion. What is it you envision yourself doing? A lot of the super rich, when they game out how they want life to unfold as they extol themselves from society, if they have the wrong mindset, they don't realize how lonely it could be to reach the type of life they imagine for themselves. Imagine you can buy a spaceship, a car that also flies and can fly straight into space, and it takes $1 billion to develop such a car. No car exists. You can just kind of whiz around in your one-seater space/car/flying mobile. Well, anyone with a serious mind or just a brain at all will realize just how close you get to being a complete ghost in this regard. You know those ghost movies where people die and they're haunted to live in some kind of space in between the afterlife and reality and life, and they kind of occupy the house that they used to live in as new tenants come in, and they watch them from their ghostly state. They can't touch them and they can't speak to them or communicate, but they try to. A lot of wealthy people spend a lot of time and money thinking about what they're going to do when society collapses. They'll set up a compound in New Zealand or something, and then they need to game out how to protect themselves from their own bodyguards. The whole purpose in being rich just fades away if you don't have things like delivery people or someone to work at the grocery store or waiters and waitresses at restaurants. Isn't the whole idea of being rich like being able to order things when you want to or go to restaurants? They imagine sitting in their house with people who love them and people who admire them and all this, and there is no happiness that is divorced from other humans. Solitary confinement is not only bad, it is the worst of all things you can experience. So what is your goal? And after you achieve your goal, then what? What'll make you happy? For example, if I ask you what your goal is, and you say, well, it's to make $10 million. And I say, okay, and then what do you do? And you might say, well, then I would have a lot of fun. And I'd say, well, do you have fun by yourself or do you have fun with other people? Well, I have fun with other people. Okay, well, who? People who don't like you, but they just hang out with you because you bought them free tickets to Disney World? No, don't bullshit me. You want to spend time with people who genuinely like you. Just about everyone with more life experience than you, everyone wiser than you, everyone older than you, and basically everyone who winds up on their deathbed realize that the only important thing in life is who they spent time with and the quality of that time. So for example, maybe your goal is to have a house with 10 bedrooms. Well, there's no difference between spending quality time with people you love and who love you in your living room, in your house with 5 bedrooms on a $800 couch, and spending quality time with people who love you in your living room of a 10-bedroom house on a $20,000 couch. Trust me, there is no difference. And the bums sitting in the chair probably have no idea that it is a $20,000 couch. You may think they care, and you may tell them, and they may be impressed, but trust me, they actually care a lot less than you think. Listen, people appreciate you for how you treat them. They will not appreciate you for achieving whatever shallow goal you think is going to make you valuable. I'm trying to relieve you of whatever feeling of satisfaction you think you're going to experience when you achieve whatever level of greed you're striving for. The things that people will remember about you are things like, when he stayed in my house, was he clean? When he borrowed my bicycle, did he return it in good condition? People will remember how you treated them. Are you nice? Are you kind? Are you generous? When you're busy, do you lose your cool? These are the things that people are measuring you on. They're not measuring you on what your goals are what your goals are. It might give them some insight to your character or your personality, but it is not the defining factor. How you treat people is the defining factor. Now, I realize that this may only resonate with people who are overachievers or very goal-oriented or who are narcissistic. I'm not talking about the people who are working hard to try and get their basic needs met. Financial stability is a completely reasonable and necessary goal, I'd say. I'm talking to the people who need to realize when enough is just enough. When enough money is enough money. The workaholics who work just for the sake of working. Well, the people you think you're serving by being a workaholic, what matters a lot more to them than your shallow goals is how you treat them. It's how nice you are. It's pretty simple, actually. They care about if you're a jerk or not. And probably if you are one of those really goal-oriented people, you're probably short with people. You're probably impatient. You're probably a jerk at some point when you could be nicer, when you could relax, when you always feel like there's something that you should be doing, there's something else you should do. People care a lot less about you achieving your stupid goal than you think. And probably after a certain amount of time goes by, you won't even care about whatever goal it was you had. But I'll tell you what people will do is they will remember that time that you were a jerk to them. That'll be stamped into their memory bank forever. That time you made a mess and didn't clean it up. That time you criticized them for something trivial. They'll remember that stuff. And you might think, well, I have money and fame, I can buy new friends, but you'll experience no happiness at all with a revolving door of acquaintances. Quality time with quality people. Right? The more experience you get in life, the more you're going to appreciate that. When you lose your cool one time, there's no erasing that. So, I guess all this just to say, don't lose sight of the goal or the big picture. Don't be too ambitious for your own good. Always ask yourself, then what? What's next? What's the result? And if people aren't in that equation somewhere, if they aren't somewhere in the result, well then you're not thinking hard enough, or you're not gaming it out long enough. You might not be using your brain enough. You might just not be very smart if you can't think far enough down the line to where you come back to people and relationships. And yes, people can be annoying sometimes. I totally get it. I mean, I'm an introvert, so I like to spend most of my week and most of my free time alone, and then a small percentage of my time with people. And if you watched my video called Questioning Stoicism, you'll understand that different people have different needs. Different people have a different baseline for the amount of social engagement they handle or require. And again, some people can be annoying sometimes, but that doesn't mean that the whole concept of cultivating relationships is the problem. As a disclaimer, I'm not saying that wealthy people don't have an unfair advantage. They do. I'm not saying that money doesn't solve problems. It does. Don't be an ass. Don't inject an idea into this that I'm not promoting. What I'm saying is that if you're a person who's too ambitious and doesn't know when to stop, you're doing yourself harm. You're doing yourself more harm than good, that's for sure. Everyone else, carry on. Skip this lecture entirely. Ironically, everyone is going to skip this video because my YouTube statistics show that the average watch time on my videos is about 30 seconds. But I can hear the detractors now, the people who didn't read my articles or my book on how to listen effectively. I can hear them saying, see, Jonathan, what you're advising doesn't work in this other different narrow context that I've created in my head. Therefore, it isn't a good piece of advice for anyone in any context. Now, taking one aspect of a good point to one extreme in a different context than is intended and saying, see, it doesn't work. Throw it all out. That tells me that you skipped lesson number 7 of my talk about critical thinking and effective listening. My intention with these videos is not that you watch them, but rather that you just listen to them and drive or do whatever it is you're doing, run. I listen to things when I run. There's really nothing to see, trust me. I mean, I guess you'd probably figure that out by now if you're watching. As always, question things, especially yourself and your own ideas. Certainty is an absurdity. I just made some sugar-free keto cookies, so I'm going to get down on those. Go shake what mama gave you.